Georgia and this is The Sound of Georgia. Yes, it's another Today in Julie Andrews history video. And I think the next video will also be one. So that's 3 in a row. But today we're talking about Torn Curtain. Yep, Julie got to work with Hitchcock. Torn Curtain came out on the 27th of July in 1966. And it was directed by Alfred Hitchcock and was the 50th film he ever made. And Julie starred in it alongside Paul Newman. And at the time he was just as big a name as she was. We'll come back to this. At this point she was riding the massive success of Mary Poppins and Sound of Music, so of course the next logical step would be an Alfred Hitchcock political thriller. So the story follows Professor Michael Armstrong, who's played by Paul Newman, and his fiancée/assistant, Sarah Sherman, obviously Julie, who are going to Denmark for a physics conference. But pretty much as soon as they get there, he leaves. He leaves on his own. He's going to East Berlin so he can get top secret information from a scientist over there that will help with his research project on the Gamma 5 missile. But Sarah doesn't know any of that. So when she finds out he's gone behind the Iron Curtain, as it were, she thinks he's defected. But she follows after him anyway, and that complicates things. This was the first movie Julie made that wasn't a period piece. All of her previous films were set before the 1960s, and that actually includes Hawaii, even though it wasn't out at the time. It was filmed first. But Torn Curtain is set in the 1960s. It was set during the Cold War when the Iron Curtain, which basically split Europe into two political groups, was a big deal. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that's how the Iron Curtain worked. I found a lot about this movie very confusing for a very long time. And given that it's not a period piece, I feel like you might have to have been living in the 60s to completely get all of this. I mean, I know the Cold War was long, it lasted from the 40s to the 90s, but it had still ended by the time I was born. Anyway, back to the movie and Julie herself. She was probably a little miscast in this role, as with Paul Newman. They were probably both a little miscast. Paul and Julie were chosen for the roles because they were the biggest actor and actress respectively at the time. I don't think they thought too much about whether these actors were the perfect fit for the roles. I have a feeling they were cashing in on the names more than... And as I said, Hawaii hadn't been released yet. And the Americanization of Emily is sandwiched right between Mary Poppins and The Sound of Music, so it gets kind of forgotten. So at the time, the world knew Julie as playing the super sweet singing nannies. So yeah, thematically going from that to Hitchcock was interesting. But Hitchcock was also the reason she took the role, so I'm not particularly well versed in how Hitchcock was as a director, but from what I do know, he wasn't particularly warm, shall we say. And in her memoir, Julie said he was pretty detached. She said, "I did not have to act in Torn Curtain. I was merely along for the ride. I don't feel that the part demanded much of me. The kick of it was working for Hitchcock. That's what I did it for, and that's what I got out of it." In fact, Julie also said neither she nor Paul were particularly happy with the film's screenplay, and that they both requested some changes. And that probably didn't help things. And there was a point before release where Julie said she wasn't too happy with her performance in the film. And Hitchcock found out and he was pissed off. But she's not bad as Sarah Sherman. I wouldn't say she's bad at all. She's very good. But I still feel she was a bit miscast. Hitchcock originally wanted Ava Marie Saint to play the role of Sarah. At one point he called Julie a singer and not a serious actress. And Julie admits that all she had to do in the role was look glamorous. But then again, maybe it's just because this was coming off the heels of Sound of Music. And having her go from the super sweet singing nun turned governess turned baroness with all those beautiful children to making out with Paul Newman in bed was jarring. So maybe part of it was just how different it was. As for the film itself, a lot of critics didn't really like it. A lot of them back then thought it wasn't a good Hitchcock film, and I think that probably dragged it down a lot. I have a feeling if the movie was exactly the same, but wasn't directed by Hitchcock, meaning the only difference would be he's not in the scene at the lobby. He always did cameos in his movies. But I think if it was exactly the same, but had a different director, it probably would have been more critically successful, because financially it actually did pretty well. It raked in 4 times the amount of its budget, and it was Universal's biggest hit of 1966. As for me, it took me a long time to understand what was going on here, and even now I still don't get all of it. Like the Countess. or the ballerina. Particularly the ballerina. I don't know all the details of what the Countess's storyline is, but I get the basics and how it kind of fits in with the overall time period. I honestly don't know why the ballerina's there. All in all, this is just not my type of movie. But despite everything I've said, that doesn't mean it's necessarily bad. Even if it's not Hitchcock's biggest film, or even my favourite of Hitchcock's films, that would have to be Rebecca, I think it is objectively good. And I'm sure not everybody who watches it will be as confused as I am. So, would I recommend it? Yeah, probably. And if you want to know some more of my thoughts on this, they actually made a novelisation of this movie, and I made a whole video where I compared it and the movie. But that's everything for today, guys. I hope you enjoyed. I hope you're all staying safe. Feel free to like and subscribe, and I'll see you in my video next week. So long, farewell!